our last bill up for consideration today is House File 3585. And I understand, as Chair Bennett would say, we have our dynamic duo of Rep. Keeler and Rep. Bakeberg. So please make your way to the testifiers table. And Rep. Keeler, since you're the member of Education Policy, would you like to make a motion regarding House File 3585?
I would like to make a motion. I do have one amendment.
Okay. And so the motion is to move House File 3585 before the committee to re-refer the bill to Education Finance. And would you like to explain your amendment and move your amendment?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair and members. What the amendment does is when the language was originally drafted, it was drafted that it would be housed under the Department of Children, Youth, and Family. That's not accurate. It needs to be housed under the Department of Education. So that's what the A1 amendment does.
Any discussion to the A1 amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. The A1 amendment is adopted. Representative Keeler, to your bill as amended.
Thanks, Chair Jordan and members. And also, I just want to thank Representative Bakeberg. The work that we have been doing around attendance has been a commitment to be bipartisan from the very beginning. We both believe that doing what is right for our students and our schools is the best way to get this work done. We have been spending close to 4 years working on things as early as the task force. Representative Lawrence was a part of that with us. And if you guys remember, we had 8 buckets of recommendations that came from that. Just to remind you all quickly, some of it was what the Compass team was just talking about, utilizing our pilot groups to get better at our definitions. If you've been in a school or have done anything around attendance, definitions on absence is very different. The second part was coordination with state and local agencies. And I just want to put a pin in that. We'll come back to that's where really this bill came from. The third one was community engagement, making sure that there's opportunity for our students to earn credits while engaging in their community and different activities. There were some specific MDE requests, which they're working on. They did a good job at giving us updates on. There was some concerns about data sharing, particularly the schools sharing specific data with our counties, and some of the areas of concern there. We've also really tried to address the idea of hiring staff to address truancy, whether that's coming from a county or a school or a community lane. That's something that was important. Transportation, and then last, just community support. And so with that, I'll pause and see if Representative Bakeberg wants to add anything before we walk over the bill.
Representative Bakeberg, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here. Before I jump into this, literally before I walked up here, I got a text from my nephew that he had his second child. So,
congratulations!
Yeah, I had to text my wife and say, "Is that a boy or a girl name?" So, so she clarified, little girl Nina is her name. So, congratulations to my nephew. So, yeah, I would echo what Representative Keeler said. This has been bipartisan from the beginning, and really pushing each other's thinking on different topics and really trying to learn from each other about the different lens that we look through things at. I also failed today and forgot to wear my purple sweatshirt. She texted me and was like, where's your purple jacket today? You didn't do that. So, but there's a couple other people. So Representative Keeler and I have been working hard on this. Matt Shaver is in here. He's been a fantastic asset to us. And also, Scott County is here as well, and Suzanne Arnson has done a fantastic job and has testified and was part of the study group as well. So, yeah, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk, and I'll kick it back to Representative Keeler to go over the bill.
Representative Keeler.
Thanks, Chair. So the bill really creates what is an interagency council on student attendance. We've seen this work in other areas. We have an interagency council addressing homelessness. I think one of the main takeaways we had in the task force is it is not just one agency's job to lean into how we support our students to increase their attendance and likelihood of graduation. We see it overlaps with Minnesota Department of Education, Children, Youth, and Family, Transportation, Department of Corrections, Health, the list goes on. And then there's other state agencies that we also learned need to be partners or stakeholders with us as we make some of these decisions. This is major. We've spent a lot of time working on literacy, and we have said over and over, it doesn't matter how great we are at reading. If we're not in the classroom, we're never able to learn the things and the tools that we're giving our teachers to learn. And so the bill is pretty simple. It outlines the different departments and the different state and local agencies that we believe should be at the table to make this decision. There's no sunset. It's an ongoing agency, putting a little bit more of the effort. I think it's clear to be said, Bakeberg and I will not be in the House next year. And so you can't just rely on two legislators to be the champions for work that moves forward. There needs to be a structure for us to really make sure that attendance stays in the forefront of our minds here in Minnesota. So with that, Chair, we can move to our testifiers. Thank you.
Great, thank you to both Representative Keeler and Representative Bakeberg. First on my list of testifiers is Matt Shaver, followed by Assistant Commissioner Mansfield. Welcome to the committee. Mr. Shaver, please introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony.
I also forgot my purple. Sorry. Chair Jordan, members of the committee, good afternoon. My name is Matt Shaver, and I'm the Senior Policy Director at Allies. We're education advocates for kids. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in strong support of House File 3585, to Rep. Keeler for years of leadership and vision in seeing the urgency and value of addressing chronic absenteeism, as well as Rep. Bakeberg's outstanding partnership on this. Ed Allies has three arguments to make on chronic absenteeism today: that this is a statewide issue that significantly impacts each member of this committee's community. Solving for chronic absences is complex work because it's an issue measured in schools with root causes and solutions not always, but often outside the reach of schools. And an interagency council is a wise and innovative approach to holistically addressing this issue. The most recent year we have statewide data on chronic absenteeism is not for this school year or last school year. It's for 2023-2024. In that year, 1 in 4 Minnesota students were chronically absent, essentially the same rate as the previous school year. There were 191,321 chronically absent students statewide who missed at least 3 million combined days of school. At 165 days, Minnesota already has one of the shortest school years by days of any state in the country. And we have too many kids missing too many of those precious opportunities to learn to read, do math, make friends, find their purpose and passions. Anything you want school to be for students can't be if they're not consistently showing up. And if you look at our statewide data and your local data too, many kids who benefit the most from what school has to offer are missing the most amount of time right now. And it hasn't always been that way. Tinkering around the edges or inaction means this post-pandemic data becomes the new normal. We find that unacceptable. Next, I'd encourage you to look at a recent study done by MDE and DCYF on kindergarten absenteeism, included with the committee materials. They talked to professionals who work directly with families of kindergartners across the state to better understand barriers to attendance and identified 5 major themes: health issues, socioeconomic challenges, family obligations and crises, ambivalence about kindergarten, and transportation barriers. And I'd ask us to consider which of these barriers elementary schools are legitimately best positioned to address and move the needle with families on. We'd argue schools can probably make the most impact, not to be expected to be most responsible for addressing ambivalence around kindergarten and transportation to an extent. The rest of the barriers cited in the study are affecting a metric we hold our schools accountable for, and yet the levers of change impacting those systems are mostly outside of the control and wheelhouse of teachers and principals. These systems do exist. Efforts and initiatives to improve access to housing and healthcare and transit are happening in Minnesota, but the connective tissue between them is weak and lacking a unifying purpose. That's where the Interagency Council on Attendance comes in, to orient and coordinate those efforts as anti-absenteeism work. Too much good work is happening in silos, which is causing kids and families to fall between the cracks. The promise of an interagency council is those systems can work together to address root causes, prevent attendance issues, and provide a more cohesive response as they arise. Transportation policy is attendance policy, housing policy is attendance policy, economic policy is attendance policy. We need an interagency council on attendance to get key representatives from these fields alongside students outlined in HF 3585 to coordinate and problem solve on an ongoing basis. Thank you for the opportunity to show our support for the bill. Thank you, Rep. Keeler, for carrying it. Thank you all for your public service to our state.
Thank you for your testimony. Next on my list is Assistant Commissioner Mansfield, followed by Ashley Hightower. Welcome back, Assistant Commissioner. Please reintroduce yourself and proceed with your testimony.
All right, hello, I am back. Angela Mansfield, happy to be welcomed back. Thank you for allowing me this next opportunity to address the committee and comment on the bill before us, HF 3585. I would like to first thank Representatives Keeler and Bakeberg for their continued passionate and engagement with the department on ways to strengthen our statewide response to attendance. Their advocacy and the work they have undertaken over the last few years really sets a solid foundation for the kind of collaboration this Interagency Council on Student Attendance can build on to be successful from the start. Thank you. The conversations convened by the Legislative Task Force in 2024 made it clear that our response to chronic absenteeism and truancy is complex, and that helping students get back to school and stay connected to learning will require coordinated work from all of the adults involved. Several gaps in coordination were identified through both the task force and the pilot program districts, and MDE remains committed to reducing redundancies, improving interagency communication, and sharing effective strategies through guidance, resources, and training. We also recognize we cannot do this work alone, and this council is a practical recommendation to keep the adults involved, aligned, and moving consistently in the same direction. I appreciate the author's amendment to shift the housing of this council from DCYF to MDE. The work outlined in this bill aligns with the expertise of our Compass staff, and we appreciate the willingness to situate this effort within education while maintaining strong requirements for interagency collaboration. It is my hope that our presentation today, along with the responsibilities outlined for MDE under this bill, will highlight the need for permanent funding for our MDE Compass team. Nearly all of our Compass staff, the same staff doing the great work we described in our presentation, are currently funded with temporary dollars, and their salary expirations are approaching. To faithfully execute the requirements of this council, we would kindly ask the legislature to consider the importance of retaining those FTEs through appropriation in a future Education Finance Committee hearing. However, since this policy committee is the policy committee, heard loud and clear, I won't belabor that point here. And we look forward to continuing the conversation about Compass staff support for the council in the Education Finance Committee. I want to close by affirming MDE's commitment to making sure our students attend school consistently, that they are excited to learn in safe and welcoming schools with caring and qualified educators, and that school communities have the resources they need to keep students engaged and coming back. Thank you for hearing our testimony today. I remain available if there are questions later.
Great, thank you for your testimony. Next on my list is Ashley Hightower, followed by Kenneth Ebon. Welcome back to the committee. Ms. Hightower, please restate your name and title for the committee, and then proceed with your testimony.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Jordan and committee members. My name is Ashley Hightower. I'm with Hennepin County's Be at School program. We are Minnesota's largest educational neglect and truancy program. We average around 10,000 referrals per year. Right now, we are at 6,158. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today and advocate for our students through a truancy and attendance lens. Attendance must be treated as a leading risk indicator for our students and addressed. Chronic absenteeism is not just a school issue, it's a public health, child welfare, transportation, housing, and economic issue. If we do not address chronic absenteeism, Minnesota risks widening economic achievement gaps, increasing dropout rates, and early entry into juvenile systems. Creating an interagency council on student attendance is the next step our state needs to take to ensure student attendance is being addressed. Schools cannot solve these challenges alone. We need a cross-agency approach. Attendance is a reflection of whether our broader systems are working together to support families, and right now I think we can do better. This council will create consistency. We need to continue movement stemmed from the student attendance and truancy legislative group. In the last year, our state has learned that attendance practices may look different depending on what school, city, or even county you live in. Inconsistencies in practice create discrepancies and disparities in how our data is read, collected, and viewed, and even funded. When students disengage from school, our systems need to respond quickly, collaboratively, and consistently. This council will create intentionality. We have invested and recognized that students need support in areas such as literacy. We have the READ Act, hunger, we have free school meals. But if those students are not in school, who are we serving? We need to continue looking at our current policies and practice to learn of the unintentional harm some of them may be causing. For example, our current statewide data systems are losing students when they've been 15-day dropped from enrollment. If a student doesn't re-enroll in another Minnesota school, we have lost them completely off our radars, some for years. This is a state-level issue that, without an interagency attendance council, may continue to be overlooked and cost us thousands. We need to intentionally invest in early attendance interventions to engage and keep students in school. Finally, this council will create awareness. We need regular updates and resources, sharing between state, county, and schools and community. We need a public awareness campaign to reaffirm that schools play a critical role as a safe, supportive environment for all students. Families should be aware of trusted community-based social services and mental health resources that can help reduce barriers to attendance and engagement. We will not see improved attendance if we do not make this a priority. To conclude, school attendance is foundational for our students to feel a sense of belonging and engagement in our community. By establishing an interagency council on student attendance, we are choosing prevention over reaction and sending a clear message to our community that attendance is not just a school metric, it's a shared responsibility. Thank you, Representative Keeler and Representative Bakeberg, for leading this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hightower, for your testimony. Next is Kenneth Ebon, followed by our, one of our youths named Henry. As you approach the testifiers table, please restate your name for the committee and then proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chair Jordan, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Kenneth Ebon, and I'm here on behalf of the Minneapolis Foundation to express support for House File 3585, the Interagency Council on Student Attendance. The Minneapolis Foundation is a community foundation whose mission is to drive collective action to realize strong, vibrant communities. We cultivate generosity by taking action on the greatest civic, social, and economic needs, partnering with nonprofits, facilitating grant making, and driving research and advocacy. Under the leadership of our Vice President of Collective Impact and Giving, Patrice Relaford, we have deepened our focus on chronic absenteeism over the past few years, working to convene several of the same stakeholders named in House File 3585. Some of you may know that we fund the Minnesota Principal Survey administered by the University of Minnesota's Center for Applied Research and Educational Improvement. In the latest survey completed in November 2025, principals across the state named chronic absenteeism as the second most difficult challenge they face, second only to student mental health. And that finding came even before Operation Metro Surge, which has further impacted student attendance across several districts. The reason absenteeism is so hard to address is that many causes lie outside of schools' control. Scholars Sarah Lenhoff and Jeremy Singer capture this well in their book, Rethinking Chronic Absenteeism, Why Schools Can't Do It Alone. Their research in Detroit over the course of 8 years shows that absenteeism is an ecological issue shaped by housing insecurity, transportation gaps, public safety concerns, and other community factors. The takeaway is clear: schools can't solve this alone. Doctors Lenhoff and Singer recommend policymakers consider cross-sector coordination and support for schools, families, and communities. That's why the Minneapolis Foundation strongly supports House File 3585. Every smart policy, every wise investment we make in education depends on one simple truth: it only matters if students are there to benefit. We thank Representative Keeler for carrying this bill. We'd also like to thank Representatives Keeler and Bakeberg for their enduring commitment to addressing chronic absenteeism. The Minneapolis Foundation urges your support for the Interagency Council on Student Attendance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ebon. Next on my list is Henry, followed by Ava Northrup. Welcome to the committee, Henry. You are not, as a minor, you are not required to state your last name, but please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
It's all right, I'll give you my last name too. My name is Henry Brick, and I am a senior from Jordan High School. I would like to start by saying I did not skip any school to be here today. I was completely absent, or at school today. But to provide some context for my testimony today, I am here as a representative of the organization Catalyst for Systems Change. We are an organization that utilizes student voice and representation within the Minnesota state government and its civic environment. I'm testifying today to voice my support for the council solution as posed in this bill, specifically in its integration of the student representation by including a representative from the Minnesota Youth Council. The student attendance issue in Minnesota is definitely a complex one to understand, let alone fix. And the group who understands it the best is the students. If you really want to understand why students miss schools, then you must look at the source. As students, we see what is happening among our peers. We see safety concerns, we see mental health issues, we see transportation challenges, and we see our peers and our friends who feel disconnected from school. These are realities that do not show up clearly in attendance data or these policy discussions. Students must be a part of the discussion, and for the same reason, if you are making a hockey team, you better make sure you have players that know how to skate. That being said, I think that the full potential of this council is not fully reached, as only one of the 17 members represent the Minnesota youth. I believe it can be unlocked by tapping into one of the most valuable resources that is the student voice. Along with voicing my support, I would also like to recommend an amendment that expands the number of student representatives from 1 to 5, with 2 of them being representatives from the Minnesota Youth Council, and the other 3 being comprised of verified student representatives from the organizations Catalyst for System Change and MAPSTARS, or the Minnesota Association of Alternate Programs. This is to reflect a variety of different lived experiences that students have across the state. Representatives. If we are serious about solving the student attendance issue in Minnesota, then we need to be just as serious about who is at the table. Students are not a symbolic addition to this conversation. We are the data, and we are the lived experience, and we are the ones most impacted by the outcome. If we want better attendance, if we want better policy, and if we want better results, then we need to make sure that the people closest to the problem are a part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. And if you need to know, I'm glad you're not missing school. I'm sure Representative Bakeberg can make a few calls for you.
I'm sure it would be excused.
Last on my list is Ava Northrup. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Hello, my name is Ava Northrup, and I am a sophomore at Washburn High School in Minneapolis. I am also a representative for Congressional District 5 on the Minnesota Youth Council. I am testifying on behalf of the Minnesota Youth Council Academic Engagement and Attendance Committee, which I am a part of. At the beginning of this year, our committee set out to find root causes as well as solutions to the attendance crisis in our state, and very quickly, a few things became clear. The first was that low attendance is an incredibly complex problem. In my school and in schools across the state, students are absent for various mental health issues, addiction, transportation issues, not getting enough sleep, and much, much more. However, adults often assume that students just don't care or are being disrespectful. If a student is struggling with their mental health, it won't help them to be told to go to class or face a punishment. Our committee also realized that there are currently very few statewide attendance policies. That is not to say that there are not a multitude of different organizations and school districts doing important work on the issue, but often these groups work in a vacuum within their own areas. Every district and school is different. While some districts, particularly in more urban areas, might have the resources for programs or social workers who specifically work to support students with lower attendance, this isn't always true for rural districts, meaning that many students aren't getting the support they need. Schools need resources and funding to successfully improve chronic absenteeism, but these things currently are largely not being provided by the state government. The benefit of an interagency council is the multiple perspectives that it would be able to highlight. Because chronic absenteeism is such a complicated issue, it requires the resources and expertise of different groups. One perspective that is especially important to cover is that of students. Often, organizations and school districts look at youth as symbolic participants instead of meaningful contributors. The complexity of this issue is best understood through the voices of those who are most affected by it, which is youth. Our perspectives must be more than a checkbox. While I do believe that this council is a step in the right direction for including youths in conversation about attendance, there is more that can be done. Currently, of the 17 mandated members of the council, there is only one young person. I believe that a better method would be to include 2 Minnesota Youth Council representatives, one from the 7-county metro area as well as one from greater Minnesota. This increases the voice and power of the people who chronic absenteeism most directly impacts, as well as allows for the varying perspectives of students in metro versus rural schools. The council should also ensure that youth outside the MYC are able to contribute and to advise the council by creating and consulting task forces and panels. These panels could be made of student leadership groups, school organizations, and youth activists. To be more inclusive of youth, the council should strive to meet outside of school hours, allow for online options for youth who do not have driver's license, and encourage the participation of all young people. Overall, I believe that this council, if used to highlight youth perspectives rather than speak over them, is an important step in the conversation about chronic absenteeism at the state level and creating coordination between different groups that are already doing important work on the issue. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move to member questions. Representative Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair Jordan, and thank you, Rep. Baker, Rep. Keeler. Appreciate this discussion. I get to be in the discussion committee with you originally with it, so it's good to see it's still alive. I have some concerns, though, and a couple of questions I'd like to bring to your attention. First question I have, and either one of you can answer this point in time. We just had a great presentation from the Compass department, right? The department here that said all the things that they're doing for attendance at this point in time. How is this better? How does this accomplish more than what they're already on the path to do at this point in time? Seems like a little bit of overlap.
Rep. Bakeberg.
I'll take this, yeah. Thank you, Representative Lawrence. It's a great question. So attendance and truancy work has been happening within the department, within schools for as long as I've been involved in education. There are consistent gaps in communication. So the goal of this council is to break down those gaps in communication to be able to address the concerns. I'll give you an example. So Suzanne Arntzen works for Scott County. It wasn't until we had a pretty significant attendance issue that I engaged with Scott County on a consistent manner around attendance and truancy. What we found is that there are multiple layers of issues for kids getting to school. And the kids that the youth that testified talked about that, mental health, and we talked about it in the study group as well. But I think the need for something like this is an ongoing requirement for these different agencies who play into and have an impact on kids, because the Department of Ed has jurisdiction over education, but it doesn't have jurisdiction over some of the other buckets that we talked about. And we need to make sure that we have an ongoing focus on this, because it is interdiscipline or interagency work that needs to be done, and silos need to be broken down, and people need to talk. Just like when Suzanne and I started talking, we were able to understand each other's lingo and the jargon in education versus the jargon in counties. And we were able to quickly communicate and more effectively serve our community. It's that type of mindset that we need to take across all of our state agencies that frankly don't communicate at a high level right now.
Rep. Lawrence, follow-up?
Yep. Thank you, Chair Jordan. Follow-up question is, you've got several organizations listed here, departments listed here as well, and in looking through it, which department or what entity would head? When we did our study together or on truancy, Rep. Keeler, you were the chair of that. You were more the director, and Rep. Bakeberg, you were the vice chair, if I remember correctly, right? When you bring this many people together, this many organizations, how does it look? Who is the head organization that coordinates the discussion so it actually accomplishes what the goal is?
Rep. Keeler.
Thank you. In the amendment, we highlighted that it is Minnesota Department of Education.
Okay, then I missed that. I apologize.
Any further questions?
Group Chair. Chair Jordan, I missed that. I apologize. So the Department of Ed will be the one that'll be coordinating, correct? Okay.
Correct.
Okay. One last follow-up question, Chair Jordan?
Yes, go ahead.
Chair Jordan, the follow-up question, last question I have is, and Rep. Baker, you mentioned on this, I have a little concern that there isn't an expiration date on this. Seems like this should have a vision, a goal, a direction, and a conclusion at some point in time. Now, I understand that truancy can be ongoing, but my feeling is that we could also always put a sunset on it and then move the sunset or add more time to an entity that needs it. So that's one of my concerns. If you'd like to comment on that, I'd appreciate it.
Rep. Bakeberg.
Yeah, thank you. And that's actually a really good point, Representative Lawrence. And I agree that I would hope that we would be able to sunset this. I've been in education for 25 years, and chronic absenteeism and truancy has been an issue the entire time professionally for me. So I would hope and pray that we get to a point where we can say, you know what, we don't need to have this anymore. But I've not seen that historically, and I would like to push our agencies to collaborate and talk. And if we get to a point where that is happening on an ongoing basis, then absolutely we should sunset this. And we can talk about what that looks like. Very open, I think, to do that.
Great, thank you. Representative Green.
Thank you so much, Chair Jordan, and thank you, Representative Bakeberg and Keeler, for bringing this forward. I just had a quick question for Be It School, Ashley Hightower, one of the statistics that she said.
Ms. Hightower, would you be willing to come back and help us out?
So in your opening, you said each year you manage 10,000 different requests or situations. And then you said this year, we're at 6,158. Do you mean this year is in like 2026 in the first 2 months?
Ms. Hightower.
Thank you. Representative Green, I am talking this academic school year, the 25-26 school year.
Thank you. Okay. I was like,
Representative Green?
wow, we are on a really tough trajectory. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Chair. And then the only other thing that I will add in here is, I think the outside reach is how we get the root cause, which I really appreciate the crossover with the agencies. And I just support the students, what they said about getting on the agency too.
Thank you, Representative Green. Representative Roach.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank Representative Keeler and Bakeberg. I know your guys' intention of this is pure, and I know this isn't education or isn't finance, but I just am curious if there is a fiscal note on this and what the cost is. For me to know that it's a good policy, I just want to know what the cost is.
Representative Roach, it is going to Ed Policy after this. Finance. Thank you. Sorry, it feels like a Friday today. It's going to Ed Finance after this. I believe a fiscal note has been requested, and it can be examined in Education Finance.
Okay, thanks.
Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Chair Jordan, and that's fantastic. Thank you. I, along with Representative Bakeberg and Representative Hill and Keeler, we've also been in the classroom for a long time, and chronic absenteeism is something that plagues us all. And I appreciate Ed Allies giving us our cheat sheet that's specific to our groups and looking at what we are seeing in our own districts. And, our schools in Austin have spent a lot of time trying to figure out the best way to identify the root causes. And I think that whenever we can ask our agencies to work together to address holistically a problem, I think it's really important. I'm trying to do that for student career pathways as well, and it's been hard to get them to work together. And I think it's difficult when we start thinking outside the box, but that's what we need. And we as legislators are required to put that challenge to them. And so I'm definitely excited to be able to see this in education finance, and I would recommend a yes vote.
Rep Keeler, Rep Bakeberg, any closing comments?
Yeah, just real quick, I think this is the sheet that's pointed out from Ed Allies. And to go back to Representative Lawrence's question, we were just chatting in, a way that we could sunset this interagency commission is to, if we have if we have some measurable goals set within it, and then once we accomplish those goals, and then it's laid out, I think that's a really good way to look at it. Representative Lawrence and Representative Keeler had, and that was her idea. So I think that's something, frankly, that that we should do a better job here legislatively, but also just within our own schools, setting, measuring, following up, and making sure that what we're doing is actually having an impact on kids. So great feedback, thank you.
Rep. Keeler?
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for the good conversation, the ongoing conversation. Like we've said, this has been something that we have been trying to address. I just want to reiterate, when I was going to school for my master's in educational leadership, I asked my community, what were the barriers to academic success outside of academic rigor? And none of them were around our math, reading, or any of the other science scores. It was around holistic things like homelessness, lack of food, and lack of access to mental health. That's like the whole reason why we need to have these agencies consistently working together. I do like the idea of being goal-focused. Once we've reached our goal of high attendance rates, then this wouldn't be needed anymore. And I also just want to make sure we make note to the youth in the room who gave the great suggestions to make sure that there's more of them at that table. We will take that into honest consideration to find a good amendment before we head over to Education Finance. Thank you all.
And with that, Representative Keeler renews her motion that House File 3585 as amended be re-referred to the Education Finance Committee. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion prevails and the bill is on its way.